The Chicago White Sox were crushed over the weekend by their crosstown rival, and a major reason was the massive talent gap between the two Chicago teams. And let's discuss on today's episode of Locked On White Sox.
You are Locked On White Sox, your daily Chicago White Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, I'm your host, Todd Welter, a lifelong Sox fan. I write for SouthsideShowdown.com, part of the Fansided Network, and also I've covered Major League Baseball for outlets such as the Associated Press. Thanks for making Locked On White Sox your first listen every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Make sure to hit the like button on today's episode. Subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox if you've not done so already, and also follow or subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. Well, the White Sox were outscored 26-8 by the crosstown rival Chicago Cubs, and despite having some moments of being competitive, it just felt like a matter of when the White Sox would be blown out, not if. Let's discuss how that talent gap was on display. Then the White Sox made a couple of moves over the weekend where one followed good process, the other just swapped out one awful player for another. And finally, it's Monday, so let's do a minor league report. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. All right, so some think that this series defeat brought back memories of the 2024 White Sox. But there were a few differences. Don't get me wrong, the defense was terrible, leads were blown, the bullpen was not good, and again, the offense got outscored 26-8. So pretty much, yeah, I can see why it felt like 2024 all over again. In fact, if you're measuring it up to the Cubs series last year, the White Sox actually regressed because the White Sox, I believe, lost like 3 games by one run, you know? I think Michael Kopech blew a save, if I remember. So technically, the White Sox actually got even worse, at least when it came against the Cubs in the Crosstown Classic here. However, the Sox simply lost the series because the Cubs are going to the playoffs this year. And I hate to say it, but unless injuries just ravage this team, because they're getting through their injuries right now, and with this lethal offense that they have, and being in a weak NL Central, they're going to the playoffs. They're likely going to win the NL Central. The Sox, on the other hand, they're just trying to win the MLB lottery. Okay, so that was really what was on display. A playoff team versus a team hoping to get the number 1 pick in next year's draft. Also, in 2024, you had no young players who could be, that you could say they're going to be a part of a future core to even just measure, to even say, okay, are they going to meet this moment? Because, in the grand scheme of things, the Cubs and Sox really doesn't matter. It's 6 games that they play. Sometimes it's 4. Just depends on how does MLB want to, feature these rivalry games. But really, it's just a cultural rivalry. Because as I had Noah Phelan on the show on Friday, when it comes to the actual Cubs on the field, it's really hard to hate the Cubs on the field. This isn't like it was 20 years ago when they had Michael Barrett and Sammy Sosa and like Derek Lee, it seemed like, coming up, and just villains everywhere. It's really hard to root against, like when they won the World Series with guys like Chris Bryant and Schwarber and Anthony Rizzo, like generally decent human beings outside of Aroldis Chapman, who's not the greatest human being. Obviously, it's still a cultural rivalry, and there were a lot of Cubs up in my comments on X, especially on the Locked On podcast. And I'm like, first of all, guys, this is a White Sox show, and thank you for punching down. Like, that's the other thing. I will say this. The Cubs Twitter trolls, the regular Cubs people are fine. Regular Cubs fans, they don't bother me anymore. Yeah, they're going to puff their chest. It's the trolls, though, that still kind of get you bothered, like calling Tim Elko, Matt Mervis, or again, just punching down. Like, oh, we beat you. Yeah, we know we're bad. This isn't 2018, 2019 when, yes, White Sox were puffing their chest and saying, just you wait. We got these guys on the way, which, by the way, the White Sox did beat the Cubs a few times during, 2021, 2022, just saying. But it's a little bit different. So, yes, in the grand scheme of things, it is annoying to have to deal with Cubs Twitter trolls, but in the standings, they play in different leagues. It's always been that way. And it's just more of a cultural thing. But it does mean something to the fan bases, because, again, you got some people that are just very insecure and just want to, live and die by their fandom. But at least in this season, the White Sox have some of those guys that you can say they could be part of the future core. And some of them actually came through with flying colors in this weekend series. Miguel Vargas became a Cubs crusher. He hit 3 home runs in this series. That swing adjustment is definitely showing he is going to be a viable player you can move forward with. I saw Beefwolf on From the 108 saying Miguel Vargas is part of the core now. And I agree. He's your third baseman that you can move forward with. Chase Mydroth was very good at the plate. Tim Elko had his moments too, hit another home run. Think about that. He has 2 home runs in his first 16 at-bats. That's why you should have called him up a lot sooner. You live with his strikeouts, but you need his power, even though he's likely going to be sent back down to Charlotte to make room for Austin Slater and Mike Tauchman. Shane Smith, Jonathan Cannon, they had some solid starts. They were both failed by their defense, though, which I'll get to in a second. Would have been nice to see Edgar Caro do better than going 2 for 11 with a walk. And obviously, Sean Burke has to find his command. Brooks Baldwin, he needs to go to Charlotte to find himself. His slump is, wow. He is really fallen off. He is nowhere near Larry Garcia 2.0 right now. So at least when it comes to the future vibes, you got some data to, hey, things could get better at some point. However, the Sox, they just don't have the superstar talent, while the Cubs, they have Kyle Tucker. And with each game passing, it keeps looking like Pete Crow-Armstrong is going to be a superstar. And you could say, oh, you're good, way ahead. He still has to prove it. The guy was a 2 F4 player last year. He has clearly gotten it. He's clearly figured it out. And he's clearly going to be more than a very good defensive center fielder who can run the bases. And that is the one thing you want to see come out of this rebuild, is the Sox actually produce superstar talent. And not only that, superstar talent that plays consistently. Because the last rebuild yielded some good players. Luis Robert Jr. made an all-star team. Yohan Moncada had his moments. Eloy had that great rookie year. But then everything just fizzled. It could not sustain. So you want them to also develop superstar talent, but sustained talent. And if you look at the Cubs, yes, they've always had their ups and downs, but they have a very good lineup that looks like it's going to sustain for a while. And it just shows how far the White Sox have to go to put together a competitive team. I mean, considering the Cubs' problem is third base in the bullpen, where the White Sox problem is everything, and that's why you had the Sox outclassed by their crosstown rival. It wasn't all this, it's 2024 all over again. I mean, it was the Cubs, even though their owner's not spending enough, that have put together a team that will make it to October. The Cubs offense is lethal. And then with all the errors, 4 official White Sox errors, but it seemed like a heck of a lot more. And the walk-a-thon on Saturday by Sean Burke, and also Mike Vassell he had troubles with his command in long relief. You just can't give this lineup extra outs. You just can't. And the Sox, on the other hand, rolled out 6 guys at one point. On Sunday's lineup, including the pitch hitters, they had 6 guys hitting under 200 in that lineup. You just can't match up with the Cubs that way. And Baldwin is in a rough slump that if he doesn't go to Charlotte soon, he's going to be joining those guys in terms of hitting under 200. Andrew Vaughn was just terrible, just awful, especially with that at-bat that may have gotten him briefly benched. Strikes out swinging on Saturday, I think it was the 6th or the 7th, but it's obviously a pass ball to catcher. He mopes instead of running to first, and even though he's seriously slow, he's probably one of the slowest runners in all of baseball, he could have gotten to first base with how far that ball got past the catcher. But nope, gets thrown out. Luis Robert Jr. only bothered to show up over his past 3 at-bats. I mean, nice double in his final at-bat of the game, but still, he showed up, it was a little too late. So when the vets are playing that bad, while the Cubs have their young stud PCA hitting the cover off the ball, along with his supporting cast helping out, you're going to get routed. Basically the Sox have just 3 players you can say are ascending. And in terms of ascending, it's Mydroth to solid, Vargas to maybe the 2 to 3 F4 player, and Carroll being that too. But the Cubs have an ascending superstar like PCA. And at least for this season, they have Kyle Tucker, and then they have Seiya Suzuki, and Michael Busch, and Dansby Swanson, and Nico Horner. The Sox just can't compete, especially in this one. They had to play perfectly, and they couldn't compete. They just were just a comedy of errors out there, literally. Well, one thing that has been different from 2024 is the front office is actually willing to churn over the bullpen. Another move was made to add an arm off the scrap heap. That's a good thing, despite it looking like Miguel Castro is not going to work out. And then they also swapped out Vinny Capra. They swapped out Jacob Amaya for Vinny Capra. So let's discuss that next. I'm Locked On White Sox. Looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce servings has 6 grams of protein, giving over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling fuller longer. Personally, I love the no-shell varieties. It's a perfect grab-and-go snack for busy days. My go-to flavors are the roasted and salted or the honey roasted. The roasted and salted are great because it's that perfect blend of roasted flavor, but just enough salt where I don't need a gallon of water to wash them down. And the honey roasted, oh, talk about great flavor. It's just an explosion of honey goodness. And if you love cracking open every shell for that satisfying crunch, the in-shell options are a classic favorite. Get snacking and get cracking with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. Again, that's wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Again, make sure to hit the like button on today's episode and subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox if you've not done so already. And if you can't catch the show on YouTube, Locked On White Sox is available on all major podcast platforms, so make sure to follow or subscribe on places such as Apple or Spotify. Either way, get your 30-minute fix of Chicago White Sox baseball venting with me. Well, the Miguel Amaya experience is over for now. One second, I got a cough here. Sorry, guys. I've been still dealing with like some, nasal stuff there. I don't know if it's a sinus infection, but, had to hit the cough button there. The Sox made a couple of roster moves after I posted Friday's episode, but hey, since this is sort of a weekend recap episode, I figured I'd go over, one of the moves that I think was, I really don't understand. I don't understand why they swapped out bad for bad. But I do like another move that they made that I think followed good process, even though I don't think the pitcher's going to be very good. But Amaya, he got DFA'd after the Sox claimed Vinny Capra off the Brewers. And Vinny Capra is basically just like Jacob Amaya. All glove, no bat. So I don't really understand what they were doing there. I don't know why they think, well, maybe Vinny Capra can hit. No, he can't. In fact, he's got worse hitting numbers than Jacob Amaya. The only thing I can think of is with all the veterans set to return off the IL soon, with Mike Tauchman, Austin Slater, maybe Corey Lee they bring back, and then Andrew Benintendi, it sounds like he's going to go on a rehab assignment. It sounds like the front office, maybe they feel Capra's defense is just a bit stronger to have on the bench, since it's likely Baldwin is going to get optioned to Charlotte. So maybe they're like, you know what? Capra can field a little bit better than Jacob Amaya. Although Capra usually mostly plays third base, where Amaya is more of a natural shortstop. It just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I mean, you're just swapping out bad for bad, especially when you got like Tristan Gray, who's doing all right down at AAA Charlotte. Why don't you kick the tires on him rather than kick the tires on Vinny Capra? They must really like late inning guys who just can't hit. I don't know. But either way, Amaya is off to Charlotte. That's why I said the Jacob Amaya experience is over for now. He's just off the 40-man roster as he did get DFA'd. Nobody claimed him. Shocking. And he is now down at Charlotte. Hopefully, though, he's never heard from again. Now, I'm not sure Miguel Castro is going to work out after already giving up 3 earned runs in 2 2/3 innings against the Cubs. But to be fair, the Cubs offense is lethal. However, I still like that the White Sox actually went out and got Castro in this minor league deal. That is what they should be continuing to doing with their bullpen. Finding guys off the scrap heap and seeing if there's still something there. And they also needed to try someone else in the bullpen who can actually throw hard. They do need some guys that can actually, throw 96 to 100 miles an hour, which Castro can do with the sinker. And all it's going to cost is $250K in international bonus pool money. So technically, the White Sox didn't even have to physically send anything to the Astros because that was the trade. And in these international deals, technically no money exchanges hands. It's just the Astros get to add $250,000 to their bonus pool money. Now, would it have been better to see if you could find a younger guy who can eventually throw hard and eventually help through international free agency by keeping that $250K? Sure. But remember, a lot of international signings end up busting, especially with the White Sox. And again, it was just a minimal amount of international money. It was $250K. That's could be used for one elite international prospect. But at the same time, say Castro somehow shakes off this Cubs series, pitches well for 60 days, you could flip him for a scratch-off type lottery prospect, international free agent type guy who might be further along in his development. So I kind of get the logic there. And again, it speaks to good process being followed. Now, the deal actually working out, I doubt it, because I'm not sure it will. As MLBTradeRumors.com, they wrote this about Castro. Castro has occasionally been a useful pitcher in the big leagues. Side note commentary. Yeah, you never want to see that when it comes to a player you just acquired. Back to what MLBTradeRumors.com wrote. Though with declining results in recent seasons. Just going to let that settle in there. Anyways, back to what MLBTradeRumors.com wrote. His ground ball rate has been fairly consistently near 50%, and his walk rate has usually been a bit higher than average. The strikeouts have been high at times, but there's been a clear downward trend. He peaked at 33% in 2020, but that figure dropped to 25.4 in 2021, 23.7 in 2022, and 22.4 in 2023. So yeah, this sounds like an acquisition right up the White Sox alley. A guy on the decline. However, the process still sounded again that the bullpen needed a hard thrower outside of Cam Boozer, because no one is a true velocity threat. After Prelander Baroa went down, they really didn't have a flamethrower in the pen other than Boozer. Jordan Leisure can sometimes get it to 95, but you don't really have that guy that's going to throw, again, 96, 97. And Castro can throw 96, 97 mile per hour sinkers. Second, bullpen arms are always volatile, so it can never hurt to see if there's an upswing. Again, it didn't technically cost you a thing. No money was exchanged. No other prospects were exchanged. You're just taking a flyer on this guy. And maybe, again, if he gives you 60 days of decent velocity, get some outs, maybe you can flip him for something. Maybe you can get your international bonus pool money back. I mean, at this point, the White Sox should be just entertaining any potential way to get any potential young asset back, whatever, whether it's international money or whether it is a scratch-off prospect. Third, a guy like Jared Shuster just wasn't getting any more outs. He just wasn't. He was struggling. So he's got, so I like that they went out and get Castro to get Shuster off the 26-man roster. Continues to follow the process of what I've been trying to say, that they should be giving guys, if you can't get enough outs, if you can't consistently get outs, to Charlotte you go, or DFA. You're gone. They shouldn't be giving these guys runways like they did last year. Although Shuster's already back. Tyler Gilbert went back on the 15-day IL with an MCL sprain on Saturday. And for some reason, they just really like having three lefties in the bullpen. I'm not sure why, because Brandon Eisert, he should be the next one put on notice after getting a brief reprieve. And I got to give him credit. He earned a brief reprieve, as I think he had 4 or 5 games where he got 3 outs. And again, one of the things that I would like to judge relievers on is, can you just get 3 outs without giving up runs? I know it's a high standard, but that is the job. That's what a reliever should be able to do. Don't give up late runs. Okay? The only one that's allowed is your long reliever, because they're logging. Usually they're coming in during a blowout or an injury. But he's given up earned runs in 4 of his 5 past games. That's just not effective. So put him on notice. But the benchmark should be, if you can't throw zeros consistently, you're on notice. And if things don't turn around within a week or two, to Charlotte you go, or DFA land. But the key for the season is to find guys off the scrap heap who can get out. You can get on an upswing, be traded at the deadline for something resembling a viable prospect, or a pitcher who's still under 30 who could actually be a long-term piece. And they added Yandris Gomez too last week. Another 25-year-old pitcher who, that's who you should be kicking the tires on. You should be taking a look at this guy. Although they bring him in from the Dodgers, and they just brought Castro in from the Houston Astros. So it just makes me think, with them always going outside the organization, I would not hold my breath on like Addison Coffey getting called up soon. He's been great at AAA, still 26, but they continue to still go with other options. So once again, the front office is quietly telling you what they think of an older prospect that the club drafted. Let's transition into more prospects as it's a minor league Monday. And let's discuss if it's time to be worried about top prospect Noah Schultz, the decision to move Grant Taylor to the bullpen, and also how did Colson Montgomery do after returning to Charlotte? And that is next on Locked On White Sox. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off or live. With player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays, fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. And the smart way to play is FanDuel's traditional money lines, the spreads, and the over-unders. But if you want to win big, it's the parlays, the props, and futures. There's always a chance to at least double or even triple your money when you go with the parlays, props, and futures. So like say you put $10 on Jalen Brunson scoring the first basket on Wednesday's New York and Indianapolis game 1 of the Eastern Conference Finals, you can win $40. As last I checked, it was at plus 400. Pascal Siakam, him scoring the first basket, that's at 700. That's at plus 700. And that means $10. If you put $10 on that and it hits, it can pay out $70. New to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Again, shout out to all the everydayers. I appreciate your loyalty. Please hit the like button on today's episode and recommend to your fellow Sox fans or baseball fans, friends, to subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox, wherever they get their podcasts, as this show is available on all major podcast platforms. Hope you had a good weekend. Again, mine, low-key. After I recorded my episode on Friday, I actually went and had to clean out the garage. And, man, that is one of the worst tasks that you have to do every year with all the leaves and dirt that accumulates. Try to, blow it out with the leaf blower and it just gets everywhere. You feel like I got a sandcastle in your lung, but really just doing some stuff around the house, watched the Cubs absolutely thrash the White Sox, and just had to deal with Cubs Twitter trolls. Well, Noah Schultz just doesn't look like the same untouchable pitcher he was at AA last season. Last season, he pitched every Saturday, 4 innings, and whether you were watching his highlights on Future Sox, on X, or on YouTube, or you were watching the game if you had the MLB.TV package, he just looked unhittable. It looked like these guys could not touch him. It looked like a lot of these hitters were like, oh my gosh, who is this guy? Now, fast forward to a year. They've probably got a little bit more tape on him. They kind of have a scouting report. Maybe these guys aren't as overwhelmed. He's having mixed results. He had a mixed series against Cincinnati's stacked AA lineup. Dominated on Tuesday. Not so great yesterday. And really it all comes down to command. And it seems like that just keeps being a thing. And I don't know what Brian Bannister has to do to help these guys out when there's actually live game action. Because like even Sean Burke says, he's getting ahead of his mechanics when he's trying to throw his slider, for example. I don't know what Brian Bannister and even Ethan Katz can do when that's happening in game. They can go out, Ethan Katz, obviously he's the pitching coach. You can go out and maybe talk to them, but it's more like, just, they got to do a lot of the work, but it just comes down to command for a lot of these guys, with Sean Burke, for example, already at the big league level. Hagen Smith, command is the same thing. And it's the same thing for Noah Schultz. On Tuesday, though, he was locked in. Walked 1, struck out 7, although did allow 5 hits and 5 innings of work. But absolutely looked like the guy that we saw last year. Yesterday, he only goes 3 1/3 innings, 4 walks, 3 hits, 5 runs, and 4 of them scored because of getting walked. His ERA is now at 4.50 after that outing. And Thomas Nesko, I like him at TJ Stats. He had this up on Twitter. So I have this for those watching on YouTube. Noah Schultz has not impressed me this season. I don't want to ring the alarm bell, but the lack of command in tandem with his depressed velocity does not spark excitement. The stuff also looks meh, And he's responding to Baseball America. They've got an article of Noah Schultz so far in 2025. He is pitching deeper into games, elevated walk rate, and a slight drop in velocity. So she'd be like, oh my gosh, slight drop in velocity. Is he hurt? The reason I bring this up too is what I've watched him on the MLB.TV package, or again, I've seen his Future Sox highlights. The stuff still looks good I don't think it looks meh. It just doesn't look consistently like, wow. Like last year, every time he threw a pitch, it was like, that is one of the most impressive things I've ever seen. This year, it's more, there are wow moments, but there's also a lot of, where was that pitch supposed to go? What were you trying to do with that? He just doesn't look consistently good as he did last season. Now, to me, the simple theory is this. He's already pitched 36 innings this season. Think about it. His total minor league career up until this season was 115 and a thirds innings. During 2 career minor league seasons. He pitched 22 innings last year, I believe, or no, 2 years ago, but he pitched 88 and a thirds innings last season. Again, he was only pitching every Saturday, 4 innings max. That was it. So he's already a third of the way through what he's already pitched in his entire career. So yeah, he's going through the next hurdle, and that is an increased workload. That is pitching every 5 days. He's got to get used to that. And really, he hasn't had to do it in 2 years. So I just think it's more of, can you muster the energy? Is it the potential side effects of, they were very careful with his arm, but now has it affected his endurance? We are seeing that. And there's no exact science to this. So they're trying things. So I think it's more, the more appropriate response, instead of being like alarmed or, oh my gosh, panicking, is just, I think it's shocked, a little surprised, rather than, oh, well, here we go again, another first round pick, probably not going to pan out. I think he's going to pan out. I think he's still going to be an A starter, because again, when you see some of, like, when it's hitting, it's still looking like, wow, they can't touch him. It's just, he's now got to go through adversity, as every ball player goes through it. Speaking of adversity, Colson Montgomery has gone through a lot this season, but he provided hope that maybe going to swing school in Arizona may still make him a big league player, except we're just going to have to accept that he's going to strike out a lot. But if he hits 20 to 30 home runs a year, you'll live with it. He went 6 for 21 in Charlotte's 5-game set against Gwinnett, the Braves affiliate. Also reached base in all 5 games, as he did draw a walk in yesterday's game despite going 0 for 4. And he had 2 multi-hit games in that 5-game series. 3 doubles in the series, along with 4 RBIs, although he did strike out 4 times. But considering things were so bad for him that he had to be pulled from game action, you take what he just did as a sign of maybe the swing school worked. Maybe it can still make him a respectable big league player. In terms of developing a big league player, Grant Taylor is now being developed to his floor rather than his ceiling. And I know I briefly touched on this on Friday's episode with Noah Phelan from SouthsideShowdown.com. The team is moving Taylor to the bullpen, and I know in the Sox prospect following world, there's some very strong emotions against this. And they're thinking that this is a mistake. And I think, it's a fair debate. Should you develop to ceiling? Or should you actually say, okay, this guy at least can be a reliever. Our bullpen is a mess. And we developed Chris Sale and Garrett Crochet this way. So why don't we go with this? And his arm was having some fatigue. So I feel like the front office looked at this and said, okay, the arm is showing some fatigue. That's our first data point. This guy can't handle it. Let's develop him to his floor. And I get why people are scared about that, because how many times did this team actually draft high floor, low ceiling guys? And then they finally actually draft a high floor, high ceiling guy because he falls because he had Tommy John surgery, and they still draft him to his floor. So I see both sides of this. I see that it could be a data point that, he already had a lat injury last year. Maybe he's just not built to hold up over a full 162, starting 32 to 33 games. Maybe he's not even going to reach 140 to 160 innings. So let's use him like a weapon. And that's what Taylor could be. He could be a pitching weapon. And that's the thing you got to ask. Would you rather have him pitching 3 or 4 games a week over, say, 4 innings, high leverage situations, likely, maybe as a closer, or once or twice a week, depending on where he lands in the rotation, possibly only pitching 5 or 6 innings? It's always a balance. It's always a juggling act. Also, the Sox have a track record, again, of developing great arms by at least putting them in the bullpen to start. Chris Sale and Garrett Crochet were developed that way. So it looks, to me, I think Grant Taylor's already big league level ready. So why not try it that way? But however, Sale and Crochet came out of the pen when the Sox were still trying to be competitive. So you could actually be burning those service time days because you got the free pass in terms of you were trying to be competitive. Where in Grant Taylor, now again, you get a free pass this year because he's already gotten past where it would, service time would not count. But you would be maybe wasting his development when he could be developed towards your putting together a great rotation for your next competitive team by just having them out of the bullpen and pitching in situations where, again, the White Sox are not going to be very competitive. So you can develop him to a ceiling because there's no other expectations. And if it doesn't work out, move him to the pen. Basically put him on the Michael Kopech development plan because remember, before all the injuries, he was being developed as a starter. Well, that wraps up this edition of Locked On White Sox. Thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen. Today, for your second listen, check out the all-new Locked On MLB Game Night. Every game, every night, all season long. Get local analysis on a national scale. Find MLB Game Night on Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And I'll be back tomorrow with, let's stop comparing this team's record at this point to last year's team, at least at this point, and I'll explain why. Feel free to leave comments about today's discussion regarding the White Sox getting outclassed by the Cubs, good process being followed in one roster edition and a questionable in another, and the Minor League Monday Report. You can leave them at the episode page on YouTube, X, formerly Twitter, at Todd J. Dub, or at Locked On Sox, or you can email me at lockedonwhitesox@gmail.com. Have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow.